In the spring of 2014, 50-year-old Kimberly Hill was subjected to violence in her own home and was brutally killed. This crime was called unimaginable, repulsive, horrific, and disgusting. But when you learn the details, all these terms will seem like a clear understatement. They say that eerie feeling never goes away, no matter how many times they've been called to such scenes. One officer recalled hoping each time that there was some mistake and the dead person would suddenly start moving, talking, and turn out to be alive. Another remembered his first encounter with a death scene. He had to photograph the deceased, their eyes frozen forever. The expert kept reminding himself that this was his job, that it had to be done. And then you have to make sure you leave all the emotions at the scene and don't bring them home. After the first time, those glassy eyes haunted his dreams for several nights. This is the work of crime scene investigators. They have to be there to meticulously document every detail as evidence. It's an incredibly tough job. Everyone who's done it eventually retires with post-traumatic stress disorder. Constantly documenting tragedy and the worst manifestations of humanity never comes without a cost. Simply seeing an image is not at all the same as being at a crime scene where trauma, grief, and violence are no longer abstract. Photographs are usually provided in at least 3 sets. Wide-angle shots to show the jury the entire crime scene. Then medium-distance shots to display several pieces of evidence and their relationship to each other and the whole scene. If a knife is lying next to a chair, the photograph needs to show the exact distance without distorting the perspective. Then come close-up shots of specific evidence. Usually, the public sees only the most innocent, if you can call them that, crime scene photos. But experts and detectives have to closely examine every detail, every wound on a dead body, and capture it all on camera. On March 27, 2014, police officers arrived at a residential complex located in Corpus Christi, Texas. A maintenance worker handed them the key to an apartment. He clearly hadn't gone inside and likely had no desire to witness the horror unfolding there. The first thing the police saw was a large stain on the carpet. A bloody trail stretched from the leather sofa in the living room all the way to the hallway. They didn't touch or photograph anything yet, just surveyed the crime scene to understand what they were dealing with. The crimson trail led them from the living room down the hallway to one of the bedrooms. There on the floor, right at the entrance, lay the partially naked body of Kimberly Hill. Next to her head was a bloodied hammer with a wooden handle. It was absolutely clear that the woman was dead, and the cause was a head injury. This was evident from the gaping wound on the back of her head and the brain matter on the floor beside her. The police took several photographs. A blood-soaked pink hoodie on the sofa in the living room. A hairband with bloodstains was caught in it. Nearby was a pink mobile phone. Obvious bloodstains in the hallway, on the bathroom sink, on the countertop. All of this had to be carefully recorded and documented. But the most intriguing photographs taken by the police were of several notes left by the perpetrator. One of them was directly addressed to the officers. It read, "Catch me and sorry for the mess, Katia." Later, when the killer was caught, he would explain that he was just in a very playful mood at the time. But what alarmed the police most was another note left right at the apartment's entrance. It read, "Don't lose your head." She might still survive, though I doubt it. Hurry up, Desiree. Desiree was the 23-year-old daughter of Kimberly Hill, the woman killed in her own apartment, Who could have done this? And why was this person now targeting the victim's daughter? Would the perpetrator reach Desiree before the police did? Kimberly Hill was born on March 28, 1963, in Oklahoma. She was described as a devoted, selfless mother and a proud corporal in the Marine Corps who served her country for 10 years. In 1990, she gave birth to her first child, a daughter named Desiree. After the birth of her baby, Kimberly decided not to return to the military. She took another job. In 1995, she had a son named Kevin. The child's father was not involved in his life, and all the responsibilities of raising the boy fell solely on the mother's shoulders. By 2014, Kevin and Kimberly were living in an apartment in a residential complex in Corpus Christi, Texas. Desiree, by then, was living separately with her boyfriend. Kimberly was a loving and caring woman, which extended to her professional life, as at the time of her death, she worked as a hospice caregiver. Everything seemed fine, but just a couple of days before her 51st birthday, on March 26, 2014, she died in her apartment in Corpus Christi, Texas. The fact that Kimberly didn't show up for work caused her colleagues to worry. Hill wasn't the type to be late or miss a shift without reason. She was a hard-working and responsible employee. If something unexpected had happened, Kimberly would have definitely informed her management. Hospice workers can tell many stories about their patients. Such stories often send chills down your spine, but for some, it's just part of the daily work environment. It's especially tough to deal with elderly people suffering from dementia. They can behave erratically, talk to non-existent people, and see things that aren't there. This was the environment where 50-year-old Kimberly Hill spent her days. When she didn't show up for her shift on March 27, 2014, her colleagues grew concerned. They first tried to reach her by phone, but when Kim didn't answer, they called the police and asked them to check if everything was okay at her home. Her colleagues had a gut feeling that something was wrong. Celeste, the hospice director, and another employee named Kathleen decided not to wait for the police to sort things out. They got in a car and drove to Kimberly's house to speak with their colleague in person. It was better than spending the whole day worrying and guessing what might have happened. Imagine their shock when at Kim's house they saw not one patrol car, but several. Police officers were bustling about, and a crowd of onlookers was already gathering. Celeste and Kathleen grew alarmed, but still didn't believe all this commotion was about Kimberly. The women didn't yet know that half an hour after their call to the police, another call came in to 911, prompting several patrol cars to head to Corpus Christi, Texas, where their colleague Kimberly Hill lived. A middle-aged couple, Timothy and Wanda, were drinking morning coffee. The clock showed 10 a.m. The last thing the couple expected at that moment was an uninvited guest at their doorstep. When the doorbell rang, the wife first looked out the window and saw a male figure. The stranger gestured for her to come out onto the porch. At that moment, Timothy, the homeowner, seeing his wife's hesitation, set his coffee cup on the table, walked to the door, and opened it. The strange visitor was short and very thin. His sparse mustache and thin-framed glasses made him look like a teenager who spent all his free time at a computer. The guy seemed harmless, even friendly. But after he said a couple of sentences, Wanda and Timothy froze in place. They stared at the young man, unable to comprehend what was happening. Their coffee had probably gone cold. The couple took turns clearing their throats, trying to cope with the flood of emotions. Then Timothy asked the stranger a few questions, but the answers were vague. So the homeowner decided to show hospitality and offered the guy something to drink. The strange visitor paused for a moment, then said that such kindness was unsettling because no one had spoken to him like that in a long time. Wanda, meanwhile, stepped into another room and made a phone call. Then she returned to her husband, and the three of them stood on the porch, staring down the quiet country road, waiting for the police cars to appear. The homeowners were so shocked by the young man's words that they now avoided meeting his eyes. The shock and awkwardness became almost palpable when finally a car with flashing lights pulled up, followed by a second one. Several armed officers jumped out. They pointed their guns at the guy and ordered him to raise his hands. He was immediately tackled to the ground, handcuffed, and taken to the car. The police cars had long driven away, but Timothy and Wanda sat on the couch in their home in silence, trying to process what the hell had just happened. That morning, a stranger appeared on their porch and asked to call 911. The thing was, he wanted to turn himself in because he had committed a horrific crime, taking someone's life. 23-year-old Desiree was brought into the interrogation room because her mother had died in her own apartment, and the perpetrator had left a message for the girl. As soon as the officers told her the news of her mother, Kimberly Hill's death, Desiree slammed her hand on the table and screamed. Then she jumped up and began pacing the room like a wounded bird in a cage, unable to believe the monstrous truth. Desiree wasn't in town, so she didn't know about the attack. After the initial shock, the girl sat down, then jumped up again and rushed to her boyfriend, who was in the room. She was gasping for air, and it was unclear whether Desiree was about to faint or simply burst into tears. Her mother had died 2 days before her 51st birthday. It took the girl a few minutes to sit down and do everything she could. She had to answer the investigators' questions because every answer could be crucial. The detectives told Desiree that the perpetrator had left several notes before attacking her mother. One of them was addressed to the girl, and the police were concerned about the safety of the victim's daughter. Based on the notes, the perpetrator intended to kill Kimberly Hill first, then her daughter Desiree, and then leave town. The question was, why was the girl still alive? Why didn't the perpetrator come for her? The autopsy of Kimberly Hill focused primarily on the extensive blunt trauma to her head. The report stated that her skull was split in two. Additionally, there were multiple ruptures in her brain, mostly on the right side. To put it simply, the injuries were so severe that part of the brain matter had leaked out, and fragments of skull bones were caught in her hair. This could only have happened as a result of a powerful blow. One of the most alarming details in the entire autopsy was the softened brain tissue. The coroner got the impression that the victim's brain had been mashed like puree with a spoon. But those weren't the only injuries. The detective working on the case tried to get clear answers about the head injuries, likely clarifying some details in the case file. The person explaining to the investigator where the injuries were located was calm. He clearly showed where the blows were struck. And at that moment, the detective wasn't talking to the coroner. He was talking to the perpetrator. A young, skinny man in a black t-shirt and thin, metal-framed glasses sat at the table, propping his chin with his hand. The suspect's shoulders were relaxed. He felt no discomfort in front of the officers as he described the attack on 50-year-old Kimberly Hill. He admitted that he had never had a girlfriend, but now he was no longer a virgin. The guy smirked and even winked at the officers. Then he looked up, paused for a second, and shared his fantasies about the perfect crime. In his dreams, the guy would dress in a nice suit, sneak into a house, and first neutralize the homeowner. He would definitely bring a beautiful dress to put on his future victim, the lady of the house. As a child, the young man liked to strangle, but after that last mistake with Kimberly, he might have used something bigger, sharper, and more suitable for the job. After beheading the victim, he would take the head and sew it back on, because he preferred to see his women not only dead, but also beautiful. The young man shared his grim fantasies with the officers, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Everything in this chilling confession suggested that the police were dealing with a serial killer in the making. Later, psychologists debated what the formal suit and fancy dress meant. In their view, the suit in the young man's fantasy represented a certain level of power and status, while dressing up the victims was actually a form of asserting control over their body and identity. The investigators in this case had to work with a significant amount of evidence. As mentioned earlier, the perpetrator left several notes at the scene. One of them addressed the police, challenging them to find and catch him. Another was addressed to Desiree, and in the third, the perpetrator wrote about himself. Notice of lifelong resignation. The third message began. The author wrote that he intended to keep his word as he was still a man, albeit a funny one, and that he was tired of this life with too much work and obligations. The perpetrator confessed that he had long dreamed of killing Desiree and Kimberly and then desecrating their bodies. And surely neither of the women had any idea about it. At the end of the letter, the guy apologized for the mess in the bathroom and wished both women luck in recovering from the shock. With respect or not, Kevin Jazrael Davis. At the bottom of the letter was a small postscript. I once killed that stupid gray cat because I was bored. Sorry. Kevin Jazrael Davis was born on December 27th, 1995. He was the biological son of Kimberly Hill and the half-brother of Desiree. His third letter was addressed to the mother he killed and his sister. The young man wrote that he was fed up with his own life and had considered taking his own life. Kevin had written this letter in advance, but then changed his mind and instead carried out the murder of his own mother. Now, sitting in the interrogation room in front of the detectives was 18-year-old 10th grader Kevin Davis. The young man showed no remorse for what he had done. He was calm. One hand rested on the armrest, the other casually propped up his chin. Sometimes Kevin gestured during the conversation, but he didn't seem nervous at all, just chatting with the officers and answering all their questions. During the conversation, Davis suddenly made a statement that left the detective stunned. This guy was undoubtedly strange, but what he told the law enforcement officers was beyond comprehension. Kevin said he had always loved his mother, but it was probably a different kind of love. And yes, he lost his virginity with a corpse. According to Davis, it all started when he asked his mother if he could kill himself that morning. He was bored with life. He didn't like living, caught off guard by the strange question. Kimberly was taken aback. Like any mother worried about her child, she tried to talk her son out of it, but Kevin was insistent. Then Kimberly couldn't take it anymore and told her son that, well, he was a grown man and she couldn't control his actions. In reality, the woman was desperate and didn't know what to do. She called her daughter and asked her to take Kevin. At that moment, the guy realized it was time to act now or never. He changed his decision and on a whim wanted to take his mother's life. He sat down, wrote a plan to kill Kimberly and Desiree, imagining himself as a science fiction writer, and then simply carried it out. Kevin calmly told the police his version of events. Kimberly Hill, his mom, was sitting on the couch watching TV. Kevin ripped the cord from his gaming console, approached the woman from behind, and tried to strangle her. It didn't work. When Kimberly started screaming and resisting, he grabbed a hammer and struck her on the back of the head about 20 times until her skull split open. His mother pretended to be dead, but Kevin knew she was still alive because she was making snoring sounds. He dragged Kimberly's body to the bedroom and stabbed a knife into her head to make sure she was truly dead. Some said Kimberly died from the hammer blows. Others believed the fatal wound was from the knife. Either way, it was brutal. And as if one attack wasn't enough, Kevin also desecrated his mother's body. He left her naked from the waist down and positioned the body in a provocative pose. Since Davis had been a virgin until then, he decided to have intercourse with the woman, or rather, her corpse. Kevin said he had always been fascinated by death, though in his fantasies it was more ceremonial and theatrical. Davis also revealed that the intimacy with his mother's dead body wasn't exactly his first experience. They had a gray cat named Claire. One day, the guy got bored, so he went and strangled the animal, then cut open its belly and placed his organ in the warm flesh. A dead cat, a dead woman. They excited Kevin. Intimate relationships with living people didn't interest him. He had no standards or morals. Anybody, in Davis's view, was just a piece of meat, as crude as that sounds. Kevin looked at the officer in the interrogation room, and something didn't add up. This clearly wasn't the whole truth they wanted to hear. The police needed to determine whether this was a simple crime or a capital offense. In Texas, if Kevin simply killed his mother and then defiled her, it would be considered a regular crime. If he inflicted injuries on his victim and then sent her to the grave, it would be considered a capital offense. The difference lies in the aggravating circumstances. To sort out these nuances, the detectives asked Kevin clarifying questions. So, by the time he dragged Kimberly into the bedroom to attack her, was she already dead? According to the young man, she was making snoring-like sounds. At that moment, he decided to grab a steak knife from the kitchen and stir her brain. He moved the blade in the wound on her head and started digging into her skull. Then he stuck his hand in and felt the tactile sensations. According to the guy, the texture was like some kind of putty, and it tasted like pudding. Toward the end of the conversation, the officers asked Kevin if he regretted what he had done to his mother. The guy admitted that in a way, he understood the strangeness of his actions. He wouldn't take them back. Kevin himself said that Kimberly was a wonderful mother and didn't deserve such a death. But the problem was that her son was a horrible, cruel, and disgusting person. The young man acknowledged that the problem lay with him. Initially, Kevin Davis planned to take the life of another family member, his sister. But at that moment, he was already satisfied with the murder of his mother. So, he just decided to mess with Desiree a little. He left her a note suggesting that their mom might still survive, though he knew full well that Kimberly was dead. Desiree in her brother's opinion, was a good, very sensitive person. He knew she would lose her mind when she read the note and decided to toy with his sister because he had such a sick sense of humor. Listening to the suspect's story, the officers thought he lived in some kind of world far removed from reality. But Kevin didn't consider himself mentally ill or crazy. He stated that he was in his right mind and knew exactly what he was doing. At the same time, he understood that in a traditional sense, he was acting wrongly. At the end of the conversation, the young man paused for a moment, then told the officers that he enjoyed taking lives and would like to continue doing so. Since he had turned himself in to pay for his crime, he felt he should now tell the honest truth and not hide his fantasies. How did it happen that 18-year-old Kevin Davis, with the most horrific thoughts forming in his head, lived calmly in society? He went to school, and no one noticed anything. Kimberly Hill complained to her close friends that she sometimes had problems with Kevin because he didn't like going to school, wanted to play video games, and came across as a loner with no friends. But that was it. His sister Desiree said that although Kevin never showed aggression or cruelty toward anyone, he had severe attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. ADHD is a neurological disorder that affects a person's ability to focus, control impulses, and manage their behavior. A person with ADHD struggles to concentrate on one task, quickly loses interest, lacks control over their actions, and is emotionally unstable. The evening before the crime, Desiree spoke on the phone with her mother, who told her that she and Kevin had argued. It all started with an ad for some dating website. The son told his mother that she shouldn't have given up on love, to which the woman explained that even if she wanted to, she couldn't bring a stranger into her home because she didn't live alone. Apparently, the guy didn't like something in her response. During the argument, Kevin was disrespectful and said many hurtful things. Unable to control himself during the verbal spat, the young man declared that he didn't care about his sister or mother, and even if they died, he wouldn't be upset. Desire's intense reaction in the interrogation room mentioned earlier wasn't about her mother's death. The girl already knew her mom had died. She was shocked that Kimberly's life was taken by her own son, Desire's brother. When Desiree calmed down a bit, she told the detectives that when Kevin was little, he often drew gruesome things. For example, someone shooting people, pools of blood, and scattered body parts. No one understood where such fantasies came from in a child's mind without any apparent reason. However, there were no signs in the past that Kevin was prone to violence. He and his sister often argued and yelled at each other, but he never hit her. Even when he was angry, he didn't allow himself to resort to physical violence. Kevin himself said he never told anyone about his plans, about what he wanted to do to his mom and sister. But for years, there were hints of it. As a child, he admitted he was much dumber and far more irritable. He even tried talking about his fantasies, but people brushed him off. The family overlooked such things or tried not to pay attention to them. And then at some point, his dark desires overpowered his common sense and came to the surface. The young man saw a motive for killing his mother in an ordinary argument. And then if everything went according to his plan, he wanted to deal with his sister too, but ultimately decided it was too much and abandoned the idea. Many people didn't understand why Davis turned himself in and why he decided not to touch his sister. But it later turned out that Desiree lived with her boyfriend, who could likely have protected her from her deranged brother. And Kevin didn't want his plan to fail, because of a boyfriend who was probably physically stronger than him. The crime took place at 8 a.m., after which the young man took a shower as he was covered in his mother's blood. He grabbed a bicycle and rode around the streets all night. Initially, he planned to leave town. He fled the crime scene on his bike, leaving several handwritten notes to taunt the investigators and mess with Desiree. Davis thought his sister would come first. He didn't know that Kimberly's colleagues would be the first to raise the alarm about her absence from work. The fresh night air had a productive effect on Kevin. Sincerely realizing that his chances of escape were slim, he changed his plans. After a while, the young man abandoned his bicycle near the railroad tracks, walked to the nearest house in the suburbs, and told the couple living there, Timothy and Wanda, that he had killed someone. Kevin asked to use their phone to call 911 and report his crime. The guy was very calm throughout the entire scene while standing on the porch of Timothy and Wanda's house. He even told them about his nighttime bike ride, how he zigzagged through the streets with no idea where to go. While Timothy talked to the uninvited guest who claimed he had taken someone's life and now wanted to be arrested, Wanda stepped into another room and called emergency services. The woman told the dispatcher that someone had just knocked on their door and reported a crime. Wanda was surprisingly composed. She hadn't fully grasped whether the young man was telling the truth or pulling some kind of prank. And as the three of them waited for the police to arrive, fear settled in her heart. It seemed to her that the young man was under the influence of some illegal substances because he was too calm and indifferent to everything. To pass the time while waiting for the police, Timothy asked Kevin why he had committed the crime. The guy gave many reasons, but none were specific. That day, Timothy was supposed to be at work, but he had taken the day off. Many believe that if the man hadn't been home, Kevin Davis might have committed another crime. It seems that due to his build, he feared physical confrontation with other men. He liked taking advantage of people who were vulnerable to him. Kimberly loved her son and didn't expect him to attack her. Wanda was petite, and if she had been home alone, Kevin might have tried to take her life. He simply didn't have the courage to take on both homeowners. Kevin told the investigators that he had started feeling these dark urges long ago, since he was 10 years old. He and his family never sought medical help, and he just accepted it as part of himself. He wasn't ashamed of being different. Many serial offenders had difficult childhoods, abuse, and mistreatment in their families. But Kevin said his mom, Kimberly, was the best mom and hadn't done anything wrong to him. On a bookshelf in her room was a photo frame, and instead of a picture, Kim had placed a note from her son. Take it out early to make your day easier. Love you. See you after school, Kevin. It was probably the most tender handwritten message her son had ever left. Kimberly was so touched by her child's words that she decided to keep the note as a keepsake. Because of all this, the woman's death caused even greater horror and confusion. As mentioned, Kevin had no friends. He spent all his free time at home on the computer. His search history included terms like torture and intimate fantasies involving corpses. Some video files and images on this topic were saved in a separate folder. After everything Kevin had done, he didn't expect people to understand or forgive him. He knew he might spend the rest of his life in prison, or possibly face the death penalty. But he was ready for it, and even told the investigators that he deserved 100 years in prison. At least that's how the young man reasoned in the interrogation room when talking to the detectives. The district attorney offered Kevin Davis a 60-year prison sentence as part of a plea deal, but he rejected it. Either Kevin and his lawyer thought he'd get a shorter sentence with a jury trial, or there was some other reason. As a result of a psychiatric evaluation, Kevin was diagnosed with a personality disorder, but he was ultimately deemed sane. The specialist stated that the young man fully understood the difference between right and wrong when he attacked his own mother. So there was no medical justification or explanation for his actions. During the trial, the jury was shown a recording of the interrogation, where the defendant confessed to arguably the most heinous crimes one could commit against their own mother. When the video ended, Kevin turned in his chair to face the members of the grand jury and gave them a wide smile. During her testimony at the trial, Desiree told her brother about her feelings. The whole time, he just shrugged and sighed dramatically, as if listening to a lecture from his older sister about bad behavior. Kimberly's father, Kevin's grandfather, said that his grandson had taken the life of the only person who supported him, and now he would be left all alone. In response, the guy merely cracked his knuckles and smiled. When witnesses spoke, Kevin waved at them and smiled warmly, as if the case wasn't about him at all. It took the jury less than an hour to reach their verdict. Kevin Davis was found guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison, but will be eligible for parole in March 2044. The young man is held in a facility focused on the psychiatric issues of inmates. Many people condemn Kevin's crime, but some blame Kimberly. In their view, when her son told her he wanted to kill himself, she did nothing to stop him. That they believe was the cause of the crime. It's strange that some don't see the cause in Kevin himself and fail to understand that he embodies true evil. But can prison reform a person who raised a hand against his own mother? Will Kevin Davis be a danger to society if he's ever released? And do the jurors realize that one day they might come face to face with this man? If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you can be the first to hear about such real-life stories.